Joseph. It's so great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? What's your connection to the industry?
Yeah. Well, I founded an agency that focuses on restaurant branding and marketing back in 2003, and built that to, I think, have some sort of notoriety or at least repute, where we've been able to work with over 250 concepts of all different sizes, from startup through growth, through evolution, and the whole gamut. And throughout that time, I've amassed a lot of experience and expertise along the way, from reading and doing and interacting.
Yeah. Did you come up through the food and beverage side of the business, or was this always a goal of yours to open, sort of a branding agency?
Yeah. I spent a significant amount of time in a small franchised concept called Big Apple Bagels. So it was my first job. I was 15, and I worked there for about 3.5, 4 years, and worked my way from mopping the floors to managing the stores, and got a little taste of everything along the way, including how to make the bagels and operations. And I think during that, I developed a love for the industry, but also an understanding that I didn't want to be in it in that capacity.
Smart. Yeah. Very smart.
Yeah. And so that kind of sparked into that whole, like, what do I want to do when I grow up? And then I fell into design. I didn't realize it was a thing, actually, and ended up going to design school, and then just learned business along the way. I started Vigor back when I was young and knew everything. Learned more recently that I didn't know anything at all, but at least you had the chutzpah to do it back then, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny how many people say that. You get into it, you think you know everything, and 20 years later you realize, oh, I'm still learning and getting my feet wet and all that.
Yeah.
As someone who has been working with owners, managers in specifically the food and beverage side of the industry for 20 or so years, but certainly in the last 18 months, I mean, we all know the stories about what happened to restaurants, and this is true across the country to varying degrees. This show is more focused on the hotel side of the hospitality industry. But, I can tell you from experience, hotel restaurants in the best of times make little to no money. It's very difficult, even if you have a destination restaurant in a luxury hotel, to get people to come in. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But I want to get your thoughts about how should we be thinking about food and beverage, and even hotel food and beverage right now, given what we've just been dealing with?
Yeah. I mean, obviously before the pandemic, I feel like some of the major players like Marriott and IHG were really stumping for innovative experiences on par, if not better than something you'd find in Europe. And then, Asia's been killing it for a while. And I think there's some reasons why. There's obviously cultural shifts where I think in we'll just say the American market, we've sort of trained people to think of hotel food and beverage outlets as not that great, as the place that you go because you have to or out of convenience, but not really a place you'd stroll into off of the street if you were a local or visiting a place and were more of a wanderluster. And it's a shame because I think there's a lot of places out there that have really killed it. And so some have risen to the top. There are some notable restaurant experiences that are in hotels. And I think that magic moment and what Marriott and the IHG were really tap into were something that doesn't look like it's part of the hotel. It looks like somebody put this whole unique moment inside of a building that happened to be a hotel. And that was, I think, the really big goal. But then, of course, here's what we get into, and the pandemic hit, which I feel like we've all said 30 million times in the last year. And while we could really dig into the nuances of what the pandemic did, I think the broader stroke is the pandemic exacerbated weaknesses that already existed. There was no fooling anybody anymore. And so the brands and the leaders who were able to pivot and look at the F&B offering through a new lens, dare to ask why and what if, I think not only survived, but found a path forward. And so there's a number of things that I think affect the industry negatively, and that is it has to be a full service restaurant. Why? I mean, look at the, you need to like evaluate the guests and the type of guests you're bringing in, as well as the market. And if there are, 300 full service restaurants that are knocking it out of the park, does that area really need another one? And do your guests need it?
Right.
So I think questions like that should have been asked long before. And I think what I have always found frustrating is even to this day, a lot of folks treat the F&B outlet as, at worst, a necessary evil, at best as this could be something nice, but never really treated with the seriousness that a restaurant needs to be treated with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. I think you bring up a good point. Why do you need a full-service restaurant in a hotel? And I can tell you that, most of the conversation for many years has just gone around wanting to make sure that you had enough services and offerings in the property to appeal to as many people as might want the thing that you're providing. And that's true of just about every service in a hotel. I mean, it's in a lot of cases, many of them don't get used enough to warrant the fact that they're there. F&B is no different. You've got the 3 meal a day thing, where you want to make sure that you're getting people for breakfast before they head out, for the day. And then your capture ratio just steadily drops throughout the day from breakfast to lunch to dinner. So a lot of hotels try to figure out, we'll be open for breakfast, close for lunch, and then reopen for dinner, or breakfast and lunch and close for dinner. And you do this math in your head. And I think, some people have executed on that okay, but operationally, staffing wise, that's also very difficult to manage. That sort of service time for 4 or 5 hours, shut down in the middle of the day, and then service time for 4 or 5 hours in the evening, and then you're done. It's really hard to get staff to manage that. I just think, to your point, there's a lot of there might be some operational efficiencies that have been driving the decision to have the amenity for the guest, whereas you got to flip it and you got to think, is it even worth having this in the first place, and risk making some guests unhappy because you don't have it.
Right. Yeah. And I think just even to add on to it is you mentioned, it's about making as many people as happy as possible. But no truer words have been said in that it's basically making the right amount of discomfort for everyone. So you'll have to look this up, but back a long time ago, before I think the Second World War or during, there were a lot of deaths because there was a rigid seat in airplanes. The seat was where the seat was. So if you were a shorter gentleman, and back then you were a gentleman, that they didn't have ladies in the Army or the Air Force for that matter. So if you're a little bit shorter, man, you had to reach. And if you were taller, your knees were at your ears. And this was causing a lot of issues. So they invented this the sliding mechanism to push you closer and yada yada. And so that's very good. But I feel like there was a time when that was really effective in the restaurant and the food and beverage world for hotels, where it's like, let's create a one size fits all. Let's create a thing that will make everybody generally okay, happy or whatever. But we're way past that time now, where there's so much competition. There's so many opportunities and so many brands and experiences out there that the one size fits all is just a flop. It always will be moving forward. And I think that's the biggest pain point is it requires commitment and a bit of risk to basically say, no, we're not going to have a hamburger or a chicken sandwich or a club, a turkey club. God forbid we don't have a turkey club on the menu for this restaurant. And instead, we're going to commit to barbecue, and,
right.
Or Mexican, or, we're going to niche in there and we're going to really own it. It's really uncomfortable, especially for hospitality companies where that's just not in their DNA.
Oh my God. I can think about some of the hotels that I've worked in the past where you might have a 1,000, 1,500 square foot restaurant. And, it's not designed at all to go. I mean, it's designed for, Mother's Day and Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas, with, your odd business travelers showing up for breakfast and dinner. It doesn't have the look, the feel, the FF&E, the expertise in the back of house to be able to do, or the desire maybe to do it in the back of house. And at the risk of just keeping a 1,500 square foot restaurant closed and dark at one end of your hotel, that also sort of plays psychologically, not just into like, the people that own the building, but, managing it too. It can be weird having guests walk by this totally dark section of your hotel, perpetually,
right,
forever. And so when you're thinking about a concept shift, a complete departure from the way that restaurants have done it in the past, is there anything that you work with or you discuss with the restaurant owners that you work with now to maybe help them get over the hump and think about this departure in a different way, not in a negative way?
Yeah, certainly. I think by the very nature of our process of developing strategies, one of the things we say is, and a good output is, it makes innovation more comfortable, because that's essentially the barrier. When you are innovating, truly innovating, it is really uncomfortable. It feels very risky, and it should feel new, and new isn't good. People are comfortable with what they know, or at least derivative of what they know. It's why you see a lot of Me Too stuff, and not the movement, but the emulation. You see a lot of emulation out there, because there is proof that it has worked somewhere, or folks are just quite unimaginative, and therefore they beg, borrow, steal, which we all do to a certain extent, right? But with knowledge and data comes power, and that is super, super true in this sense. So when you start to understand who your core patrons are, and we use the word patrons at Vigor because I notoriously dislike the word target, and all the other violent terms that happen to inch their way into marketing, campaigns. These are all war terms. And we're supposed to be friends with these folks. So we want to foster patronage, and I think that starts by understanding who your core group is, which is a combination of prevalence in market, as well as in the hotel space, prevalence of guests. Who are they in mass, mixed with, are they primed to love this type of brand, this type of experience, mixed with, are they the type of folks who are going to promote it heavily? And so when you get those three P's together, you actually find a really great group of folks to talk about, or to talk to speak to, and communicate with. And newsflash, they may not be the most prevalent group of people that come to your hotel. It has to be a mix of those three. So, for instance, if you have a road warrior salesperson that happens, that's the kind of people that come to your hotel the most, they may not be the kind of people that are going to promote it, and they may not be primed to really love it, because they may just be like, I want a burger, dude, and it's like, well, we're not making burgers here. But I think what's great about that too is more and more the bigger box brands are putting out niche hotel brands, like an Even Hotels, like a Moxie. And I'm blanking on the one that just was released, I want to say from IHG. It's a luxury brand that they just launched. And I think with that niche comes an easier way to say, hey, we are not for everyone as a hotel, and therefore we are not for everyone as a restaurant brand in this space. And that starts to at least support some of that thinking. But with a good strategy backed by research and data, it should start to actually come together that, wow, not only can you have something that's going to rock and roll in this hotel space, but it's also going to rock and roll in the local area as an option.
You see, and you bring up a really good point, because I think forever, up until the start of the pandemic, we in the hotel business have not done a very good job of engaging the people around the building. Our focus is always internal. It's almost never external, with the exception of the special event days when you're just trying to get locals in for Mother's Day or Easter.
Yeah.
That shift to looking to saying, okay, so we've got 100, 200, 400 rooms in this hotel. We have a captive audience. They're here already. They're probably going to go out and try restaurants. If they're there for multiple nights, they're definitely going to go out and try other venues in the city around the hotel. But you'll probably get them for one or two meals. But that business is so seasonal in most of the country, where you're going to have periods in the year, many periods, in fact, where your hotel may be running, in the good times at 20 or 30%. You need to look outside to get people into your restaurants. You can't just survive on on that in-house capture.
Yeah.
So you bring up a really good point about if there's that F&B director or restaurant manager right now in a hotel trying to figure out how do I fix this ailing restaurant, you have to look outside the four walls.
Absolutely. And you need to, pardon me, you need to consider that consumer journey, that CX, that consumer experience from beginning to end. So why are you making me go through your hotel lobby if I want to go to your restaurant? You know, why not, if you're really going to make a go of it, why not make an investment for the facade of the restaurant area? It doesn't have to be a drastic shift from the overall look and feel of the hotel itself, but gosh, it really should make a statement. And I think that should be a challenge to not just architects, but the people who are guiding them. You know, I want to be able to walk into the restaurant and out of the restaurant and never realize I was in a hotel. And at the same regard, I want to be able to stay in the hotel and walk into the restaurant without having to go outside. And it's such an easy solution to a problem for a full service or even a more of a fast casual experience where you don't need fast casual and QSR. I mean, you don't really need staff to do that. And you could have a really strong breakfast and a strong lunch and forget about dinner. If you make some of those shifts. But too often, I mean, there's a creative leader out there. His name is Stefan Sagmeister. And he wrote a book or curated and wrote a book called Beauty. And I went to go see him talk about it. And, you know, in all honesty, I think he's a little bit of a navel gazer himself and, you know, don't buy into everything he says. But I found his talk, the way he started his talk, very interesting. He polled the entire audience based on a slide. So the first slide was shapes. Which one of these shapes are the most beautiful? And it was a circle, a rectangle, a triangle, and I don't know, some other polygon. Inevitably, people, raised their hand, and they were kind of all over the place. He's like, which one's the ugliest? And then people said the rectangle. Okay, cool. Then he went to a colors slide. And I think he had like 4 or 5 colors up there. He's like, which one of these is the most beautiful? And of course, there were some arguments. He's like, which one's the most ugly? Or the ugliest, I should say. And everyone agreed that it was brown. He's like, great. So we can all agree that brown rectangles are the ugliest things in the world. And then he starts clicking through slide after slide of the buildings in which we live that are all brown rectangles. And when I see hotels being built, I laugh now because I'm like, it's a brown rectangle. Because it's not offensive, but my gosh, it's ugly.
Oh God.
You know?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It appeals to everybody and nobody at the same time.
Mm-hmm. It's like, that is not offensive, but not quote unquote, not offensive does not win today. I'm surprised it ever really won, but it certainly doesn't make waves. It's not worth talking about. It's not remarkable, which is a word that we use very much on purpose. And those are the 3 components of something that drives the desire to go try a place.
So is it the food, the design of, I don't mean the interior design, the look and the feel of the place. I know that's obviously important. What I mean is the look and feel of the logo, the look and feel of the experience that you're trying, the outward experience that you're trying to invoke. So food, outward design of logo and experience, or something else maybe that I'm not hitting on. What's like, in what order would you go?
Yeah. I mean, I got to say that the food has to be good, but it doesn't have to be great. And the reason why I say that is because all the things surrounding the food that create a full experience, something that's well orchestrated, can actually change the flavor of food. I could put, a meal, let's say from Bacchanalia here in Atlanta, which is one of the best restaurants in here. If I put that in a McDonald's dining room, you wouldn't think it was nearly as good. And so, yes, the interiors are important. Yes, the logo and the brand identity elements and the menu systems, it really all matters. And it should matter. Just as a human, if you met a human who was incredibly brainy, very cerebral in the way they presented themselves, but they were dressed like a vagrant, you would have a sort of disbelief in what they were saying, you know? And so I cringe when I see restaurants throw down a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper in front of me and expect me to pay $35 for a meal. And I'm like, wow. So do you put this amount of care into what you're doing back of house? Because if so, I don't want to pay $35 for this. And so I think it really is everything and not one thing in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. If you were to give advice to somebody who was starting, like a listener of the show, who was realized that there was a problem in their restaurant and they wanted to try to tackle it, where would they go first? What's the thing that they would like, okay, I'm making a plan. This is the first priority.
Yeah, I mean, I think first priority is figuring out what is this thing supposed to be, and starting to make a commitment into some sort of cuisine direction. And New American is not the opportunity. Let me just tell you that.
Better burger. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, look, you can service your guests with a general menu as room service, and that's great. And you should, because honestly, if I was in, let's say, I don't know, Memphis, Tennessee, I'm probably pretty barbecued out. And so like having just a nice fish dish might be really a good breath of fresh air for, a lunch or something like that. But when it comes to the actual restaurant, make a commitment, man. Like, commit to something, and then start to identify where things are off the mark, knowing that everything matters, even the outside landscaping. I mean, nothing worse than rolling up to a place that has dead plants, because everything's an indicator. It's either a reason to believe or a reason to disbelieve the claims. Everything, and so, even if there's that little piece of wallpaper up in the top corner that started peeling back, you got to fix it. And it seems innocuous, but it's not.
Right.
And I think
if you even see it,
so
many people can't even see it. Like they just, that stuff, especially if you're in the same room day in and day out, you stop seeing things.
Yeah. There's got to be a way to reset your brain on it, or just bring in an outside person, to have them take a walk through and mark some things that were jolting, and start with the jolts. Like, wow, I was really surprised to find that your heat lamps were out. Or something like that.
Right.
It's like, oh, well, we don't really use them. Okay, great. Then get rid of them. Because to me, that's a reason to disbelieve. I wish there was an easy fix, but like with most things, there's not, it's too complex to easily fix.
And that's why nobody does it quickly, or many don't do it well, or at all.
Right.
Yeah. Because it takes the effort.
And that may be the opportunity is shut it down. Have a kitchen that services the guests. You can try opening a virtual restaurant out of the back of the hotel, where you don't need to do anything cosmetic to the restaurant itself, and that could actually realize some efficiencies, but also profitability. For those that don't know, virtual restaurants are basically restaurants that exist on third-party delivery and online ordering only, so they don't really have a traditional brick and mortar. And so what's great about that is if you already have the kitchen, fantastic. Maybe turn that front dining area just into another banquet area, and just run virtual kitchens, service your private events, service your guests, call it a day. That might be a good opportunity or a good shift to make.
Right. It's definitely something to think about. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
As you're going out, if you were going into a new area and you had to do a comp set analysis for a new restaurant concept, how would you go about that? What are some, a little bit of the secret sauce or a look behind the curtain for those that don't really know how to attack it? Yeah.
Yeah. So traditionally what we've done is we take to Yelp, we take to Google, we start searching for what's out there. It's very, very, very tedious. At the risk of dropping a self-serving plug, I have some really good friends that have a startup called Born, and they have taken all that research and made it literally the click of a button for all intents and purposes. The amount of data coming out of this company and out of their system it would have taken us 8 to 16 weeks to amass it, and we'd probably still not have enough. So I'm really, really bullish, pun intended for those that know the logo of Vigor, really bullish on that company and what they're doing, because I think it's going to help change the game to realize concepts that work, because the competitive data is there.
Is it only F&B that they do?
Only restaurants. And
only restaurants, okay.
It just happens to have a very specific touch with hotel F&B, because everything that they're doing is based on address. Well, here's the great thing. The hotel knows where their address is, you know?
Yeah.
And so
right.
There's a whole other side of Born where it's like, I got a concept, where do I go? But this first step that they've launched, tell me your address and we'll tell you everything you need to know about it.
Wow.
Yeah,
is
foot
it
traffic, all that stuff.
BORN.com?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. It's actually B as in boy, ORNE. And it's bornreport.com.
Not so shameless plug there, but I'll definitely link that in the show notes for people to check it out, because that could be really valuable.
Yeah, I have a little piece of the pie, but they're not in a situation where they're turning profit right now. They're still early, but it's very much worth looking at. Outside of that, what you're doing is you're going to old school means. You're scouring Yelp, checking TripAdvisor, checking even Google, running some searches. There are other companies out there that I think start to amass some of that data as well. It is a bit tedious, though. And when we evaluate competitors, we're looking at, of course, Cuisine. What's the average star, of their online reviews? What seems to be their number one go-to? What are the general commentary around those brands? What is the feeling? And then we also try to pull out the personality traits. So we like to use 3 personality traits to represent brands. And you can have a fun time doing that too. We like to talk about characters or celebrities that are representative of those traits. And that'll help establish another layer, which is there may be, let's say, 10 barbecue restaurants. So when I say barbecue, you may go to reclaimed wood, old rusted corrugated metal, sort of peanuts on the floor, maybe, that kind of vibe. But if you have 10 of those and you still want to do barbecue, our question would be, why not go super modern? Or why not go tropical, add in some Hawaiian flair, something to set aside and make this unique. And then from those personality traits, you can start to evaluate your product mix. So rather than just your standard Texas barbecue, why don't you start adding in more new school flavors, maybe Asian flair, and start to give it a reason to be in there?
Yeah, that's great advice. And back to your point earlier about emulating versus doing something a little bit different. Emulating versus being inspired by.
Yeah.
And that's the rub, right?
Yep, absolutely. Like there's
no pun intended talking about barbecue.
I mean, maybe pun intended, because rubs can be delicious.
Question just came to mind. Is there a way to figure out what potential profitability might be in your comp set analysis? How other restaurants in the area are doing? Is there any secret sauce there?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is befriending those people and quite honestly just asking where they're at. And I think that's actually a really important thing to check off. I think that there's an old school mentality of competition and what that means. And for a lot of folks, competition is something that you're meant to squash. In the restaurant industry, that is like the worst thinking in the world, in my opinion, because these guys are your friends. Like, you guys are working together, actually. If you can bring a bunch of people to an area collectively through your collective efforts, that's point number one. And then someone may be hungry for my barbecue restaurant. Someone may be hungry for your hamburger restaurant. After that, it's up to the whims of the person. A good case in point of that, I have friends up in Baltimore, Maryland. They opened a restaurant called Banditos, tacos and tequila, a lot of fun, party. And then about a year and a half later, they bought the place across the street and they opened up a bourbon kind of smoked brisket smokehouse kind of concept. Huh. And then right next door to Banditos, they opened up a gastropub that sold big fat burgers and sandwiches with a lot of beer, and looking at this, you're like, those guys are idiots. They're poaching their own customers. They're not. All 3 of those places are bringing a massive amount of people down there. And then from there, it's like, do I want tacos? Do I want smoke? Do I want, burgers?
Yeah.
And then, of course, there are other restaurants around that area, too. So you got to kill the idea of competition and start befriending these people, because you guys can share and collectively you have the same goals.
Yeah. The more interesting outlets that bring people into the area, the more customers that draw in, the better it is for everybody, right? You're not poaching.
Right.
That's a really good point. Are there any best practices that a food and beverage manager in a hotel might be able to employ that you've used successfully in the independent world?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one is just remove the word hotel. Stop. Just don't even acknowledge that the hotel is a part of it, and really focus in on creating a best-in-class restaurant experience that happens, of course, to exist in a hotel. And that really is a mentality shift. You know, you see people, I've been in situations where they tried to optimize the uniforming. That way someone didn't have to have a different uniform than a hotel. So when you get people who are operationally minded are really good at optimizing budgets, but budget optimization sometimes is a really bad move for the experience. And I think you need to know where that fine line is. For instance, shared plates, like actual plating, like OS&E, that may be a good idea. You might be able to use the restaurant's plating for your banquets, depending on the type of hotel. It could also be a terrible idea. I mean, could you imagine eating, having a fine dining experience and having to eat off the same plateware that you would use for a banquet?
Right.
In let's say a La Quinta, like it's like maybe spend the money and get different plating here. And same thing. So let's just say at the La Quinta you have a Mexican restaurant with very festive plateware. Is that what you want for weddings? And so I think it's just having those conversations, and it all starts with a really strong strategy. That strategy is the lens to evaluate the decisions, because there are places to optimize. Of course, in the P-mix, there's places to optimize, but not all optimization is good optimization.
I can literally hear F&B managers screaming at the top of their lungs right now.
Yeah.
Like, yes. That's what I've been telling my financial controller.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, too, is to think about the traffic flow, not just from the consumer standpoint, but from your team. And so I have a friend, his name's Tobin Ellis. He's actually really well respected in the bar design world. So he'll be saying yes right now. But one of the things that he spoke about a few years back at a conference, and it just stuck with me, is the sheer idiocy of making the back of the bar symmetrical. And that's a really good example, but you can apply it to the front of house as well, and the floor. But if you think about it, a bartender's success is dependent on muscle memory a lot of times. Their ability to engage, their ability to have good interactions with guests is dependent on their knowledge of their space, of their workstation. So if you have something symmetrical, a bar, which architects love to do, it's like, oh, it's the same here, and then it's opposite over here. How nice to look at. Except
Mirrored,
if I'm on the right side of the bar tonight and I got my flow and you put me on the left side, everything's the opposite. And you could probably literally count the inefficiency in time. And you're fumbling and you can't make eye contact because you don't know where your things are. But the same is also true for the front of house. And thinking about your team's experience will bleed over into how the guests' experience overall is felt and digested. If you have if you have a very poor flow and things don't make sense, food takes longer to get out, accidents happen, more plates are broken, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's really good points. Two questions for you related to trends before we wrap. What are you seeing from a food perspective that if somebody's looking to do a change in concept that might get them some legs going kind of into the future?
You mean like literal cuisine?
Yeah, literal cuisine. Like, are there any inspirations, anything that is starting to get big in North America that may be worth looking at? Yeah. So I'll first start by saying beware of pioneers. Most of them died and some resorted to cannibalism. So make sure that what you pioneer is something that is at least close to the American palate. We don't need another burrito concept. We don't need another burger concept. That's not to say that there isn't a space to innovate there. It's just we don't need another same. Some cuisines that I'm seeing really take off is a reclamation of tapas and what that means. There's a style of food called birria. I think I'm probably saying that very wrong. It's a deeply marinated meat. It's very delicious, and I think it's Spanish or Brazilian. I forget which. So that has been claimed to really take off this year, and I think it needs a little more time to get there. But tapas is a great way to accentuate a bar and increase
check averages in a way that is very aligned with the consumers of today. You know, don't want big plates, don't want big meals. Give me a lot of a little, or a little bit of a lot, I should say.
You know what interests me, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but you bring up a really good point. I mean, I've had this conversation with so many people in the industry. I've said it myself. I've experienced it myself. I know listeners have as well. You go to Europe, and they're doing this kind of thing exceptionally well. Mm-hmm. The food is great. It's inexpensive in the back. And from the tapas idea is what you're referring to. You can get these little plates coming out to the table, you know, every time you order a drink. And you're just, in some cases, you're just sort of getting racked up a few bucks a plate that comes out. When you're in Europe, it'd be more over here. And I've always wondered why so many places over here have such a hard time executing on that, even though if you pulled 1,000 people, 900 of them would be all about that concept.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's about finding the talent back of house that can really make it happen. And I think just innovation, you know, like for instance, I was speaking to a concept. I was trying to get them to buy into like a slider concept, or at least a very heavy slider menu for that very reason. And their words were, our cooks won't do it, which is mind blowing. I'm like, fire your cooks? Like, are you kidding me? Wow. You're going to let the cooks decide what's happening here.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, sliders are a great mechanism to deliver a lot of different flavors for people that aren't ready to commit to like one solid hamburger experience. But, yeah, I mean, I think tapas, small plates are huge. That oxymoron is very much intended. The other one too is Asian cuisine, specifically buns and dumplings. You know, we have concepts like Wow Bao, and some others have tried to come. They kind of went as well. But it's a really interesting food. There's a brand out of Brooklyn called Brooklyn Dumpling Shop that is just killing it right now. They're selling hand over fist franchisees, and it's all based on an automat format. So the automats, for those that don't know, were basically a bank of drawers. And essentially back in the 20s and 30s, you'd go in, you'd throw in 25 cents, and you'd grab a pie or you'd grab a sandwich that was made. It's kind of like the old school vending machine, but much bigger. It was a whole room. Well, they've revived this with a huge tech backbone, and it's really taking off. And I think the food is delicious too. And then one that I haven't heard of, but seeing what I'm seeing with consumers, the folks that are starting to really, well, there's two things, right? So baby boomers are in the process of reclaiming absolute dominance when it comes to the spend. They're getting into retirement age. They're tapping into their 401ks, and they're looking to flex and relax and enjoy things again. So that's one thing that's truly happening. The other thing is young millennials and Gen Y have severe cases of Columbus syndrome, where they're discovering things that have already been discovered, but they think they discovered it. And so I think because of that, there is an argument to be made of a reclamation of classic dishes that have been kind of forgotten. So think beef Wellington, you know? So a lot of people haven't had beef Wellington. It's not easy to make, but my God, is it delicious when it's done right. And I guarantee if you ask a younger individual, when I say younger, I'm talking late 20s, early 30s, if they've ever had beef Wellington, they may have heard of it, but their probably answer is no. Because it's just not
where do you
done.
get it these days?
Yeah. It's like, I think last time I actually had it, it was fantastic, was in Brussels, Belgium.
Oh, wow.
So I think finding some of these traditional sort of forgotten dishes, reclaiming them, I think could be a really big opportunity for an enterprising full-service restaurant. And it's something that's impressive because you're not seeing it on menus, but that's not because it's not good. It's just people kind of forgot about it.
It's a great idea.
Our whole existence is made up of this. I mean, hell, we forgot what concrete was for a very long time until San Francisco burned. You know, and then someone's like, hey, there's this stuff that the Egyptians made. I feel like we should use that. You know, so I think it's time because the baby boomers know about it and they probably have at least had it. And so it'd be a good nostalgia trigger for them. And the younger folks, they'll love it. You know, there's some good foods out there that have been forgotten.
The last trend I want to ask you about is tech. And, you know, this last 18 months, 2 years, I do believe that this has been a bit of a crucible for people that are working on things that are going to revolutionize our industry completely. There's no doubt tech is going to play a huge part of that. the most interesting application of QR codes that I've seen, and you know, are they going to continue to have their day after all of this? Who knows? Who knows? But you know, being able to pay your check at your table via QR code is one of those interesting ideas that when you see it in practice, it's so obvious.
Yep.
But you don't. It's sort of like it's right in front of you. You don't really see that is a good application for it. Is there anything that you're seeing in the industry that may have legs as we get out of this?
Yeah. I don't think QR codes will. The issue that we have with QR codes was adoption hindered by lack of technological simplicities. So now all of our phones have a QR code reader on it. You know, before that you had to actually download one. So, right. You know, the pandemic did bring QR codes to the forefront and forced adoption. So I think we'll see them not go, but the question becomes what happens when I scan it. So I think innovation of, like you just mentioned, payment through QR code. I think augmented reality has yet to even be scratched. The surface of it has barely touched. Accentuating an experience and taking people on a journey triggered by a QR code is a big one, where they can actually experience another layer of the restaurant experience through the literal lens of their phone's camera. And what does that look like, and what happens? So, you know, take that tropical barbecue restaurant I talked about that doesn't exist yet. What if more tropics were added? What if sunsets or birds or things like that just happened in or around there? How beautiful would that be? You can create other worlds like this. So I think I think a big one is going to be convergence. We have a lot of pieces out there, technological pieces, and not a lot of pieces that talk to each other or come baked in. And so I think you're going to see acquisitions, and I think you're going to see merging the technologies to create like super suites. A brand that's doing this already is Q. It's a POS system, and they were built with API forward. So it's not something they tacked on, and they are built to integrate. And I think integration is the key at this point. And then outside of that, you have some outliers. So the Brooklyn Dumping Shop, again, there's the Automat, which I think is fantastic for concepts that don't require human interaction, but still want to produce great food. And I think all of this creates a really good scenario where we're shifting the labor needs, and I don't really like the word labor, but we'll use the vernacular, I guess, to not just folks who know how to write down an order, but folks who are actually technology folks who actually know to troubleshoot technology, fix, and basically a higher skilled labor than we have required in the past. And then I think finally, this is my own quote, I made this up. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's me. I said that.
Never heard that before.
Yeah, that's all me. So, with that, as we get more and more down this journey of technologically integrated, supported, or fully baked experiences, the need for really high touch, really well done full service will only get greater. And I think, that's something we can't forget. There is a space for all of it. But half-baked isn't going to work. It's got to be that high-touch, Danny Meyer, famous experience, because we want that. Humans still need human touch, man. But technology fits another need, and it does align with our behavioral shifts that have been a long time coming, honestly.
Yeah. Joseph, I appreciate you giving a look behind the curtain and some, maybe even a look in the crystal ball a little bit.
That's right.
As to what we can expect out of this. If people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
Yeah, you can find my company, vigorbranding.com is a place to go, and we're on most channels at Vigor Branding. My new book should be out by the time this is out there. It's called The Bullhearted Brand. And so some of those things I was talking about was strategy. I lay it all out in that book. No holds barred. Everything's out there in my whole brain in 275 pages. And you can learn more about that at bullhearted.com. Or sorry, .co.
Bullhearted.co. All right. I'll make sure to link everything. We talked about a lot of different companies. I'll link everything in the show notes for everybody.
Awesome.
But this was a lot of fun, Joseph. Appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's wonderful.